Dude, I'm excited to jam with you on some content. And I don't know why I didn't think of this earlier because we've known each other for a long time and now our careers I feel like have crossed paths, in the last
Yeah,
couple of years.
yeah.
But for those of you listening, I know Garrett through our time at College Works Painting was a company that we used to work at together. And was it 2008 or nine? I think we met.
2009. Yeah, I mean, you're really dating us here, man. I thought it was like a couple of years ago, but no, it
Yeah.
seems time has gotten away from us. But yeah,
You still have hair though. I don't have any hair left.
you look good, man. You look good with the bald, though. I will say it actually comes off really nice. So
No, I appreciate that. I'm curious when you started that job, did you want to get into sales or was it just something that you decided to do for fun, got tricked into? Like what made you decide to get started with that?
it's actually really funny you bring this up. So I'm going to tell a little story here, and just kind of the foundings, if you will, of really how this whole College Works Painting kind of relationship really got kicked off. But I was actually at a CU football game for the spring game. About a month ago, and I went with a good buddy of mine, Matt Griffith. I think Matt
Yeah,
as well
I
too,
know Maddie. Yep.
from there as well. And we went to the football game, and so we were just kind of reminiscing about old days in college and whatnot. And we happened to walk by the actual building where the original class talk took place. And so, I was telling Matt the story of like, hey, here I am, a young like freshman, or I think I might have been a sophomore at the time, in college, and not really sure of what I wanted to do with my life and my career. I actually was right at the precipice of switching my major. So I was a computer science major for the first year and a half at school there. Did a few semesters and ultimately decided, I was like, you know what? I really don't like this. I'm not having a lot of fun with this. And
Yeah.
so I decided to make the switch into more of a business focus,
Mm.
talk or track for my curriculum. And so this all kind of happened around the same time, and it was a beautiful spring morning in the spring semester there, sophomore year, and I'm sitting in music appreciation class, right? So probably the easiest college class that I've ever been to is music appreciation. I loved it. Who all loves music, but we had this guy come up, to the front of the room, and here I am. It's like a big, like 200 person, 300 person, classroom, right? And so there's this guy that comes up to the beginning, at the beginning of the class before the professor's there, and he has shades and a longboard with him. And he didn't take his shades off the entire time. And he's like, "Hey guys, do you want to make some money this summer? We can make upwards. Our interns make upwards of $30,000 to $40,000 over the summer. Just
Shit.
go ahead and fill
He
out your
lied.
name. Go ahead and fill out your name, and we're going to get back in touch with you." Super vague, dude. No one knew anything of what it was, and so of course I filled out my name, and I got a phone call, and that started the interview process with College Works. So the rest is downhill from there, but that was kind of how it all started. But to answer your question, no, I had zero intention of making a career in sales at all.
That's funny. And for those of you listening, what we did together was not a complete scam, I promise, but they definitely recruited like it sometimes. Um, I learned so much from my first year as a manager that I don't know about you, I still go to a lot of those things. A lot of the frontline leaders that I work with, they haven't been taught at their org some of the very fundamental things that we learned as sales
Mhm.
managers at like 19 or 20 years old in college.
Right. That's right.
And I'm curious for you, what were some of the big lessons you learned as a first year sales manager when, hey, I did the whole selling the house painting thing, which for those of you listening, you know, to paint your house, it could be 3 to 10,000 bucks. It's a decent, size, and you do all of that and compressed into a 3 to 6 month, period. And then you came back and actually hired other college students, taught them how to sell. Do you remember like what were some of the big learning lessons that you had in your first year as a frontline leader that you still maybe go back to and reminisce on today?
It's really funny you asked that, Jason, because I actually feel that history has repeated itself for me in this regard. Actually, in a very recent scenario here that I'm happy to get into. But what I learned right away is that the quality of people that you work with and that you surround yourself with and that you bring on board, whether it's as a teammate, as somebody that works for you, or just quite frankly, people that you hang out and surround yourself with. The quality and caliber of those type of people are so critically important. And so I think back to that very first year when I did the internship. And I remember that I did a really good job of recruiting people and hiring people, and we had a lot of folks that were interested. But I also felt like I kind of bent the rules a little bit. I really compromised on the people that I thought were going to be really good for the organization and really good for my team that ultimately didn't pan out. So a real life example of that was when it was actually remember this very vividly, especially now that the date is coming up. But it was the 4th of July weekend, right? 4th of July weekend. This was probably 2010, if my dates are serving me correct. And I remember that I had about 8 people on my team that were going out and building their business. They were knocking on doors. They were networking and marketing to really generate leads for the business. But what ended up happening is it was probably like the 4th of July, like itself, or maybe the day after. I ended up getting some phone calls, and they were from the people on my team. And 4 out of the 8 people actually quit on the spot that day. Right.
Oh, damn.
And so those phone calls were to let me know that they're no longer going to be a part of the internship. They decided to move on. And so that was a pretty big detriment. At that point, I had spent multiple months, developing and building a relationship and training. And, all that hard work went for nothing essentially. And I lost about half my entire team, that one
Yeah.
weekend alone. So big learning lesson. It again, with the people that you bring on board and that you surround yourself with. Yeah.
Yeah, well, let's dig into this because the reason why I thought it'd be really great for us to do a podcast is sort of this theme, excuse me, around learning lessons from you as a top sales manager at Zoom last year. And you've just been crushing it at Zoom. And that's one of the first lessons that when we were prepping for this that you talked about was being really picky with hiring. Are you able to go much into what sort of happened recently in the last year with Zoom? And I'd love to kind of unpack this hiring bit first.
Yeah, I'm happy to. So, I think this learning lesson definitely resurfaced itself for me, and I'm really definitely at the point now where I'm learning that the people that I bring on board are people that you're going to have to spend immense amounts of time with, and so. The way that I kind of approach this is a little bit of a different scenario. So we can kind of take this back to where Zoom was, maybe call it 3-4 years ago. And for those of you that don't know, yeah, Garrett Graston, obviously from Zoom. I've been at the company for about 7-ish years now. And so I've seen this company grow from, a very small startup company where nobody really knew the name Zoom to, the IPO that we did in 2019. And then, of course, through 2020, where the global pandemic of COVID really changed the game and everyone started using Zoom. Everyone knew the name Zoom. Every work call was done on Zoom. Every happy hour was done on Zoom. Every birthday was done on Zoom. And so, as a company, when you grow that quickly, from a sales perspective and from a user perspective, it's amazing while you're in it. Like, again, I think the
Yeah.
company, the growth, the recognition, the awareness was fantastic. But I think there were some trickling effects that happened, during that year that we're still feeling the aftermath here today in 2024 and beyond. And part of that is your systems and your processes and the people that support that crazy growth rate didn't quite catch up as quickly as the sales did. And so I think as a result of that, when you're growing at such a fast clip and a fast rate, you make hiring decisions based on the current state of the business, where money is coming in, where leads are coming in. Capital is easy to come by. Spending is a lot more, frivolous from, certain companies, right? And I think over the last 2 years in enterprise selling and SaaS and software selling, I think we're all starting to feel the drawbacks of kind of how that crazy time period had erupted. Again, there was not only Zoom was a huge, COVID Zoom, boom stock, and companies that had a lot of success. There was a whole lot of companies that were in that same mind frame. In 2023 and 2024, however, I feel like we all got brought down back to reality.
Yeah.
Some of the fundamentals of sales became less and less important when capital was so free, when the ability to buy something was much easier, less decision makers, less paper process. And so I think as a result, I myself as a leader, and I know certainly others and other companies as well, probably made hiring decisions that weren't necessarily the most meticulous in terms of the interview process and how we went through it. So I felt like for me, that was a big learning lesson that, I definitely have an insight and a knowledge as to what it takes to be successful in a role like this. Because before I was in leadership, I took on, that account executive role myself, and I was very successful at that. So I think for me, like the big learning lesson was just, to never compromise your own values on what brings success, the type of skills that it takes, and really the person themselves. I believe that a person should be humble. I believe that a person should be hungry. And I think a person should be smart. Like those are the types of qualities that I look for in an interview process. And so, at a high level, those were some of the lessons that I've learned. Certainly happy to go, anywhere else, but at a high level, that's where we're at.
Yeah. So let's talk about hiring. How do you balance the urgency of hiring with being patient and saying, no, I'm going to pass on this person? Because there's got
Mhm.
to be a lot of pressure for you when you're like, hey, I have an empty spot on my team. Every month that goes by, I don't have that spot filled. That's harder. Everyone else has to work in order to hit the target that we want to hit this year. So how do
Mhm.
you balance that? And then also just upward, downward pressure, I guess, from your leadership. What advice would you have for someone in your position that's like, how do I balance all of that stuff with being like, you know what? Just because I'm saying no now and choosing to, essentially play the long game. I want someone that I can work with for multiple years, not someone that's going to fill a spot for 2 or 3 months that we're going to have to fire or that's going to quit. How do you balance those
Mhm.
two things?
Mhm. Yeah, it's a tough balance. I mean, I think as a frontline sales leader, as a frontline manager, I've been told this in a variety of different ways, but you kind of are the sandwich, right? And I don't want to use any expletives here today, but you're a blank sandwich where you're taking blank from up top and blank from below, right? And so
Oh,
the
you
the
can use
idea
profanity,
here.
Guard, if you want to.
Okay, okay.
You
I
can
want to
say
make
shit.
sure. Okay, yeah, okay, shit. It's shit sandwich, right? Like, you have to deal with pressures from above, but also the issues coming from your team itself. And so, Jason, I think for me, I actually take a page out of your book. And
Okay.
I recall you vividly saying this. And I can't remember where it was, whether it was with our engagement working together recently, or if it might have been, at College Works. But, you said at one point, and I remember this very specifically, you said, if it's not a fuck yeah, then it's an absolute no. Right.
Yeah.
And so for me, like that really helped kind of understand, like around hiring, like, are you really, really excited to work with this person? Because
Mhm.
if it's not that upper echelon F yeah, then it's most likely going to be a no. And I think where I've learned over my career on getting into trouble with that is when you start compromising on that a little bit. You never want to sacrifice quality for urgency. And that goes not, in just a hiring perspective. That's pretty much anything. That's anything that you
Yeah.
you break down, whether it's a sales process, whether it's a product development, whether it's a release date, a marketing campaign, an event that you're hosting, right? That type of mentality, I think, holds true in a variety of different industries and spaces.
Love that. Yeah, that's a Sivers quote, actually. Yeah, if it's not,
Okay.
well, actually, I think his was, if it's not a hell yeah, it's a no. And Tim Ferriss adapted that to the fuck yeah. So
Okay.
be
There we
picky
go.
with hiring. I love that lesson. I've learned that the hard way in my business too, where you have doubts about someone and there's certain little red flags and you just choose to ignore them for whatever reason, but just trust your gut is the big thing there.
Mhm.
Um, the second lesson that we had talked about was this concept of staying active and staying involved. And I think this is really hard as any kind of leader because you grind it out as an SDR, account executive, whatever it might be, and you finally got the leadership spot. And the biggest mistake you can make at that point is losing touch with what it's like to be one of your
Mm,
reps.
mm.
So, how do you stay active and stay involved? What does that mean to you?
It's a really, really good concept. And, I think it's more true now, again, in 2024 than ever before. I've always been a big believer in staying as close to the customer as you possibly can.
Yeah.
I've been in this leadership role now for, going on, 5.5, almost 6 years in the leadership role specifically. And, if there's one thing that I've learned is that the further and further you get away from the customer, the further you lose touch on reality, the further that you get away from what is truly driving those initiatives forward. So, for me, one of the things that I've always made it a point to do, even in my leadership role that I'm in here today, is I want to meet with a customer every single day. I want to make sure that I never lose touch with what's going on in reality, because the moment that you think you're too good to meet with a customer or to get on a call and to hear feedback on how you're doing, how your team is doing, or how your company is doing, the moment you really start to lose touch again with reality. So I've never been one of those sales leaders that wants to manage from the ivory tower and, look at spreadsheets and, really try to make decisions based on just pure numbers and data. I think there's definitely a quantitative side to any engagement, but there's also a qualitative side to any engagement as well. So, one of the principles that I always implement with my team is to be very active and involved in the deals. We believe heavily in team selling here at Zoom. I think the moment that you start to go rogue and be a lone wolf and try to carry the world on your shoulders, that doesn't work anymore, right? Our buyers are more informed now than ever before, and they're engaging with sales teams at a much later stage than they ever have been before. So as a result, you have to deliver impeccable value in every sense of the word, in every sense of the interaction with the customer. Every moment is precious with a customer. Every meeting is precious with a customer. So, how can you leverage your team around you to stay involved and stay engaged and stay active? So, at a high level, like that's a few of my principles around, staying engaged and active in all of my team's, opportunities and accounts and, just ways that we can succeed together.
So, what types of activities are you typically participating in? Is it like sales calls primarily, like introductory calls? Are you hopping and helping with negotiations? Are you
Mhm.
helping run power hours where your team is prospecting maybe and doing some pipe gen? Like, what are kind of the, again, for someone listening that's thinking and they're looking at their calendar where they could inject themselves a little bit more with their reps? What are some of those specific areas that you look at usually?
So the short answer is all the above, but kind
Yeah.
of my philosophy, right, is as a sales leader, I really have two guiding compasses or guiding principles, if you will. I'm either making my team better or I'm making my customers better, right? Those are really my two guiding principles. And if it doesn't fit into one of those two categories, it's likely not going to be prioritized by me. So I think having a very clear understanding of what moves the needle and what drives the needle as a leader is going to be critically important. So, this is a paradigm and a paradox, I will say, that sometimes I even struggle with too. So let's just take, for example, a scenario where I have the option to potentially go visit some of my customers that are out of state right now. So what that would mean is I would have to get on a flight. I'd have to go to the airport, do all that process to check in, do the
Yep.
traveling, stay in a hotel, so on and so forth. And yes, I may have an incredible impact with that one customer or a couple of customers that I'm going to go see. And I might have an even better impact with the AE that I'm going to join with me on that visit, right? So if that's option one, what is my opportunity cost, right? So what am I losing and what am I losing access to by taking that trip? So yes, I may impact one AE with their one or two accounts that I might go see as a result of that travel. But what about the other eight AEs that I'm not spending time with? Would my time be better spent coaching, training, elevating performance for the greater good? And I think that paradox is something as a sales leader that you don't know, like when you're in it. Oftentimes it does take experience to really know where to put emphasis and where to put time. But that is one of the things that I have learned over the last few years, where I know where my big needle movers are from a performance perspective, whether it's deals that we're working or whether it's AEs that I'm working with as well. Right. So just a little example, I guess, of how you need to balance those choices with that.
Let's dig into that quite a bit. That's an interesting concept. The criteria that you use to determine where to spend your time.
Mhm.
Can you tell us any more? How else do you think about, common situation is, do I spend time with the C player who hasn't shown a lot of initiative but is very struggling versus the middle of the pack person versus my A player that anything I give them, they're going to give me an exponential return. That would be an example. Are there any other
Mm.
kind of criteria maybe that you use? Or another question might be something that you didn't do a very good job of 4 or 5 years ago when you were starting that you've kind of sharpened your ability to figure out where to spend your time? Because I feel like this is the question to answer
Yeah.
for a frontline leader, is like, where am I going to get the best? It's the whole concept, small hinges move big doors. I don't know if you've heard that. It's
Right.
like, where can I
Mhm.
find those areas of leverage?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a great topic, and I think we could talk for hours on a conversation like this. But the way that you asked a question of like, hey, what have I learned over the last 4 or 5 years? And what I have learned is that not all customers are treated and created equal. Not
Yeah.
all AEs are created and treated equal as well. And so I think as a young leader, when I first kind of got into the game and I was really involved with the team, I had a goal to spend equal amount of time with every single person because that's just what I needed to do. I needed to spend time with everyone, right? And I think what I've realized as a result of that is that the hours in the day are precious. The moments that you spend are precious. And so you need to find where you're going to have the biggest impact. And so impact again can mean a couple of different things. I think impact to me means, hey, where am I going to be able to move the needle most from a dollars perspective? So if we have large deals on the table, or if we're working together on accounts and these are very strategic accounts that my dedicated time, energy, and effort spent with that AE will yield dividends, it could be a dollar value, right? And I think that's probably the most easily quantifiable. The secondary one is another one where it's somewhat of a paradox, but like, let's say I have an A player who wants me to join one of their calls to maybe review some pricing or to go through a joint engagement plan on our opportunity together with the customer. As much as I would love to go talk pricing and be a part of an active opportunity and move a deal forward with one of my best people, is my time best served there? Or do I have another opportunity to work with maybe one of my B players who is working super hard, but is maybe rowing the boat in the wrong direction, so to speak, and maybe
Yeah.
a little bit of coaching and a little bit of guidance with him might be better spent from a time perspective than spending time with my A player who I know is going to crush that call whether I'm there or not. So those are some of the
Mm.
things that I try to balance. Again, dollars, deals, opportunities, or development, skill set, improvement of my team and my people.
Yeah, where are you going to get an outsized return, a multiplier, if you will, on development with a B player? The the opportunity there to sharpen up the skills of someone that is putting in the effort, you're going to get an exponential return on that versus someone that's probably going to close the deal without you. Like you said, that might just need a little face
Exactly.
time. How do you balance doing versus teaching? This is
Mm,
something I still have to check myself on as a business
yeah.
owner too, where it's so easy to just hop in and like do something for someone or tell them what you need versus using it as a coaching opportunity. And I don't know what they call this phenomenon, but it's this kind of concept where it's like teaching someone how to do something in the moment takes longer than actually doing it.
Yeah.
So teaching them might take 5 minutes, but doing it takes 30 seconds. And you just like, it's hard to look out a year from now and say, what's the consequence of doing this every time and having to
Hmm.
deal with it? Where if I taught them the one time, I wouldn't have to ever do it again.
Hmm.
But how do you
Hmm.
think about doing versus teaching and making sure that, hey, I'm actually transferring skill to a rep versus just hopping in there and closing the deal for them essentially, or doing something that doesn't really help them get better.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the old parable of, catch a fish, feed a man for a day, teach a man to fish, feed him for a lifetime. And like,
Yeah.
it's easier said than done, though. It's much easier said than done. And to be 100% honest, that's a big development area for me. I think I'm still working on that, kind of like you mentioned as well.
Mm.
And I think you need to be able to take the time to sit back a little bit, just kind of reflect on what it is that we're doing. And again, ask yourself, is my efforts in action either improving, my customers or my people? And if I go and solve a problem for my AE, sure, I might be improving my customer situation. But what happens when that AE encounters that again? They're going to come to me and they're going to expect me to do that
Yeah.
same scenario. Versus if I taught the skill set, the item, the piece of feedback that I needed to do, it would be a much better outcome for the longer term. And so again, that for me is still something that's a little bit elusive, and
Yeah.
it is something that I want to always get better at. And I think that if you ask any, successful leader, they're going to tell you the same thing. It's a
Yeah.
constant battle to continuously improve on that skill set.
Yeah. That's tough, man. So we got one, being picky with hiring, two, staying active, staying involved. I love this concept of just getting in the pit, right? And doing the work with the rep. The third one is this concept around owning your week.
Mm,
And I'm really curious, how do you protect your time? Because being picky with hiring, staying active, staying involved, that requires a lot of time to do
yeah.
that. And at a company like Zoom, as large as you guys are, I mean, the challenge I'm sure that you deal with is there's so many internal things going on that you can get pulled into, whether it's enablement meetings, people wanting some of your time, your boss putting time on your schedule. There's just all kinds of demands on your time. How do you protect your time so that you do have time to spend with your reps and do the things that either make your team better or make your customers better?
Yeah, it's a really really good point, and I think this is also one of those scenarios where being a frontline leader has its challenges in a variety of different ways. I mean, I'll give you a real life example is selling large enterprise type deals is not just working with the customer to get the deal done. Sure, that's a major component of that, but the way that I think about this is in order to get large deals done, in order to have an impact at customers of significant size and value to an organization, there's really three pillars that you have to focus on. The first one being the customer. And that customer has a variety of different personas that are involved. I'm looking at some of our more recent opportunities right now we're upwards of 20 to sometimes 30 different people that are involved to get these deals done. Each of those represents different areas of complexity and needs and wants. So that being one pillar you have to be very, very good at. The secondary pillar is selling the product, selling the vision, selling the idea internally to all of your stakeholders. So, selling a deal to the customer is one leg of it. Selling the deal to your company, your organization is the other deal. There's approvals that need to get involved. There's exceptions that need to get made. There's people that need to get involved, different alignment that has to happen cross functionally. And for you as a seller and also a leader, you have to be able to manage that feedback loop very, very effectively. Again, selling up the chain and selling down the chain of why what you're asking for is important and critical to the deal itself. The final one is especially relevant in what we do and what a lot of enterprise SaaS companies do out there is their partner communities. So there's a heavy channel influence with a lot of the deals. So partnering with resellers, partnering with different types of local suppliers, manufacturers, different hardware folks, integration services, right? And basically selling that same value stack up and down the chains there, because there's a lot of relationships that are built on those types of of engagements. So, for me, those are all the important things of getting deals done. And again, I think when you talk about protecting time, like you have to make time for all of that. You have to anticipate that it's not just the customer call. It's the 2 to 3 to 4 other calls that happen after the customer call to go fulfill on the promises that you made during that call. And so I think it's important to have a goal every single week, have a goal every single day. So, call me old school, but I have a whiteboard right here that I write my quarterly goals on of like, hey, here's what I want to accomplish in the next 3 months, both from a business perspective and from a personal perspective. I live on the quarterly schedule. And so
Yeah.
I have that front and center every day. So that's kind of like my guiding compass of what I know needs to be done to make the most impact. But then what I also do is I break things down by the month. So I have quarterly goals, I have monthly goals. And then even further than that, I have a little notepad that I write on, every week. And I say, here are my top things that I'm going to focus on this week. If I can get this, and this done this week, like that's going to be a win. And then even so, I also do that on a daily basis. And it just gets a little bit more minute, but they all kind of lead back to those larger quarterly goals that I talk about. So a little bit more on the philosophy of what I do. Happy to get into tactics, but that's a little bit more on the philosophy level there.
So how do you say no?
Yeah,
So do you find yourself having to do that? Do you get pulled into something or invited to something that's like
yeah,
not totally a big priority and
yes,
you have to say no?
and
How do you handle situations like that?
it's hard to say no, right? I think
Yeah.
we as leaders, managing and leading individuals to higher levels of performance and success, we always want to say yes. We always want to say yes to helping, yes to jumping in, yes to everything. But learning to say no is actually probably one of the more powerful concepts that I've started to implement and learn, because again, like me wanting to be active and being involved, I sometimes get involved with too much. And so you do have to say no. So again, it kind of goes back to what we talked about earlier, Jason, of just the kind of paradox of what's going to move the needle most, from the development of a customer or the development of my AE. Sometimes I get invited to meetings where, I'm not going to add a lot of value. So it might be a technical discussion. It might be a demo where, we're going to have engineers and specialists who are really doing their thing. They're contributing to their part of the sales cycle. And, I happen to get invited to those calls. I'm not going to usually attend those calls because if I'm not adding value to a call, whether it be an
Yeah.
internal call or an external call with the customer, I don't need to be on it.
How do you push back when you get invited by someone that's maybe not a peer? necessarily, like, or one of your reps. Maybe it's like someone in your leadership. Do you ever have to do that?
So you're saying like if I get invited to things that are not critical to the business, but it is from people of authority or potentially different departments, so on and so forth. Yeah.
Yeah. So, for
It's a tough
example,
one.
like, like an enablement leader maybe invites you into something because they want your feedback or your take on
Mhm.
a program that they're building.
Yeah. Here's my philosophy is I'm always down to give help where and when I can. I'm not going to say that I am like this strict calendar, person where, hey, if you don't have an agenda and like I don't know you, I'm just going to automatically decline. Like I usually
Yeah.
try to give people the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah.
Um, but there does become a point when giving them the benefit of the doubt becomes a little bit more abusive. So if it is a strategic initiative or a relationship that I'm looking to build as a frontline leader, then I will probably still take that call. I'll probably still learn with them and get to network with them and understand what makes them tick. Because here's another thing about being a leader too, Jason, is that in an enterprise technology role like I'm in right now, the main thing that you need to do as a leader is you got to know where people are at. Your network is your net worth. And I am a firm believer in that, both internally within the four walls of the company or outside of the company. You
Yep.
never know where your next opportunity is going to come from. You never know when you're going to need the help of one of your peers and colleagues that are outside of your domain, your functional area of expertise. And as a leader, you have to know where to go because you never know where you're going to need that help. And I'll tell you, man, like just I have been bailed out of so many tough situations because I've built great relationships along the way. So I can go tap on finance's shoulder, right? I can go tap on sales ops shoulder. I can go tap on marketing's shoulder. I could go tap on my services organization's shoulder. I can go to any one of my executives and ask a favor for them, right? That's something that I've learned over time and that I've built over time. So I've been able to put in a lot of deposits with those people by taking the phone calls, by being involved, being active, even though it didn't necessarily directly relate to my improvement of customers or improvement of my team. I intrinsically understand that as a leader, you have to be connected and be very well aware of who's going to help you move mountains. Because
Yeah.
in order to get big deals done, man, it takes a village, and you got to know where to navigate with that
Yeah.
village.
That's such a big lesson there around just internal networking, and your personal brand within the org and being able to call on favors when you need it. Um,
100%.
one more
Yeah.
question on owning your week. How do you structure your week? Just sort of generally. What do
Yeah.
what do Mondays look like for you? How do you try to structure your days? All of that
Yeah.
kind of stuff.
It's a great question, and it's something that I would say that I've perfected over time, and I'm continuously getting better. But I used to, and I'll tell you why I say that, because when I first started, I had a little bit of a flawed idea that hey, I'm just going to load up all of my one-on-ones on Monday, and I'm just going to only focus on my one-on-ones on Monday.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what happened with that. It failed miserably because when you're doing, back to back hours and hours of one-on-ones, you become less effective over
Yeah.
over time, right?
Yeah.
And
That sounds
so
awful, dude.
and trust me, I mean, when having a team of 8 or 9, AEs, and your one-on-ones are 45 minutes to an hour, that's 8 or 9 hours of just straight one-on-ones. And I tried that. I tried that at the very beginning. I was like, if I just bang out all of my one-on-ones and on Monday, then I'm gonna have so much more time with everything else the rest of the week. It doesn't work like that. So, one of the things that I've really tried to do, Jason, and like this has been a big like learning lesson for me, is really uncovering what and I know this is going to sound a little crazy, but you ever heard of the concept of like a circadian rhythm before?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yep.
Right? So the idea that, the amount of sleep that you get, then, nutrition and all the things that you do, exercise, directly correlates to peak levels of performance, peak levels of energy, and dips of energy, right? So I have this app on my phone. It's called Rise, and basically it tracks all that stuff for me. So
Yeah.
the idea is that like it knows like when I'm sleeping, when I'm waking up, when I actually pick my phone up or I start engaging. And what it's taught me is that I'm actually more of a morning person, right? So I like to wake up probably anywhere between, call it 5:30 and 6 in the morning. I have a 7-month-old son who starts waking up right around 6
Yep.
a.m. and he wants his bottle, so that's been helpful to align there.
Yep.
But I think the idea is that I've learned that for myself, doing my peak activities in the morning are actually most impactful. So what I try to do is I try to schedule the most brain intensive like activities during those peak hours, and then things that aren't as mentally taxing in some of those dips and some of those valleys. So for me, that window is typically between, call it 7 a.m. and like call it 10:30, right, is where I really get my big peaks. So I try to take my most impactful activities and schedule them there. So that's kind of a part of my general, how do I say it? How I structure my week. That's probably what guides me the most, is how do I align with my circadian rhythm, right? The second thing is I do try to split things up. And so I told the example of like, hey, not doing one-on-ones all day on Mondays is not a good plan. So what I've learned to do is split that up over 3 or 4 days, right? So maybe it's a handful each day. What I also do as a leader is I try to reduce the noise, right? That's a big thing for a leader or anyone that's looking to get into leadership, is to reduce and filter the noise that is coming at you and your AEs from all directions. From every department inside the company wants sales to do something, right? So
Yep.
your job as a leader is to synthesize and filter that information to really make sure that they're focused on the things that are going to keep them productive. So I really only ask my AEs for 3 commitments per week. So the first one is a forecast call. We spend all that time talking about numbers and deals. It's a forecast call. That's one commitment. The second commitment I ask them for is a team meeting, which is really more designed around enablement and bringing on guest speakers, product knowledge improvement, guest speakers of partners and different things like that. And my goal is to really bring a fresh perspective to keep that knowledge sharp and to keep the training sharp. And then the final one is really more tactical. It's a prospecting session. We are a 100% outbound team that I'm a part of. So, we have a call blitz that we do every single Friday where I'm on the phones with the AEs. We're making phone calls, we're sending emails, we're doing follow-ups, and it's just a working prospecting session, right?
Yep.
So on a weekly basis, those are the 3 things that I ask of my AEs, in addition to a one-on-one. But outside of that, I'm like, guys, like I want you to focus on your customers. I want you to focus on your customers, focus on your partners, and anything else is probably not as important in that case.
One question, just because the prospecting session, I call them get shit done sessions. This is
Yeah.
something I just like beg every sales leader to do with their team. How did you create buy-in around that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the proof is in the pudding. Like, how it really all started was getting very real with the team and saying, guys, the selling environment in 2024 is vastly different than what it's ever been before. In order for us to be successful, we all have to be rowing the boat in the same direction. And so, what I really wanted to do is I wanted to actually prove that to not only myself, but to the AEs. And so what we've done and kind of how it's evolved over time, it all started out with like, hey, whoever makes the most phone calls or whoever gets the most meetings set up, Garrett's going to work on your accounts next week, and so
Yeah.
it was like a fun contest that we did. But now what it's really been more involved in is like I'm just doing this as my natural part of my day. It's not a contest. No one gets more or less of my time, but I'm just focused exclusively on moving the needle forward in my customers, right? Getting the right touches to executives, inviting people to upcoming events that we're working on, doing strategic outreach and executive alignment emails and follow up. So again, I think for me, it's like this has just become a part of our culture where every Friday morning we do it, and it's just been ingrained over the last couple of years. But I found that it's really humbled me. I still get hung up on. I still get
Yeah.
rejected. When I make
Yep.
phone calls and when I reach out to customers, but that's okay because I will never ask my team to do something that I'm not willing to do myself.
Love it, dude. So number 4 is a culture of excellence. I love this one.
Mhm.
Excellence is actually one of our core values as a company at Outbound Squad. So I'm curious your take. What does it mean for you to have a culture of excellence on your team?
Yeah, this is a fun one. Yeah, I mean, a culture of excellence. I mean, the way that I think this kind of got instilled in my brain and my thinking over time is actually when I went. I take it back to my football playing years. So high school, even a little bit in middle school as well. But I played football. I played varsity football for my high school football team, and I was so lucky to be a part of a team and a culture that just valued winning so much, right? Just to brag a little bit on that old day, like I'm gonna go Uncle Rico here and throw a football over the mountains, but you know, uh, we didn't lose a single game in the regular season. We
Yeah.
across my entire high school career, we never lost a single game. Now in the regular season, we lost in the playoffs, so certainly we didn't take home the final championship, but having a perfect record year over year over year and being a part of the same group of guys that got to experience that throughout that time, it really taught me the value of hard work, number one. You have to be dedicated to succeed. There were times when we were doing, 2-a-day practices and, going at 6 a.m. in the morning and 2 p.m. in the afternoon. And, everyone else, all my other buddies were out at the lake, at the reservoir, hanging out, not really doing much, during the summers. But I recognized that it was that hard work that I put in that allowed us to, continue that excellence, right? So I think that's really where it got instilled for me. And so as I bring that to, where I am today, I really try to create structure. I try to set proper expectations ahead of time. Like these are the expectations that I would have for you as a seller to be a part of this team. These are the minimum levels of performance and standards that I expect, when you're working with customers, when you're running a sales process, when you're doing a discovery call, when you're running a proof of concept. How do you present pricing? There's a method and a formula behind all of that I've taught and coached my team on by having that standard of excellence. Because what I do believe in today's society and in enterprise and SaaS sales in 2024 and beyond, you have to be much more than just a great product, right? You have to solve a very good problem and you have to have a very good business alignment to whatever your product delivers on. As a part of that, it also requires a world class sales process. It requires a world class execution process, partnership, and alignment that goes with that. So, for me, I try to just elevate this level of thinking to not settle for mediocrity, right? To not settle for just average, to not settle for just getting over the finish line. I want all of my AEs to be well over 100%, 200, 300, 400, 500% possibly, right? That's what I want the goal to be. So, I mean, we could go really far and deep into excellence, Jason, but like, I think that it's just a mindset that you as a leader have to continuously bring and hold people accountable for, right? Because at the end of the day, you are creating the culture that you
Yep.
want through that.
Yeah, I feel like excellence is the glue for everything that we've talked about today. It really is. Dude, this was great. So be picky with hiring, stay active, stay involved, own your week, build a culture, build and sustain a culture of excellence. This is great, man. It's good jamming with you. Where can people go to connect with you? Are you guys hiring at Zoom? Like, let us know where we can go to check you out and connect with you and check out what Zoom's got
Yeah.
going on and all that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, I appreciate you, bringing me on here. We've been a big follower of your work for a long time, Jason. And, I think the work that we even did together a few years ago is still being circulated here at the company, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
But, yeah, connect with me on LinkedIn, guys. Happy to connect. Definitely feel free to find me there. And that has all my other important contact information. But yeah, Zoom is always looking for great people, right? We're always looking for, the top notch, excellent folks that are looking to make an impact and, deliver happiness to our customers, right? That's our motto. And so if there's ever any interest or anything I can do to help, like, let me know, but always looking for great people.